take it I have to read this. Breathing Water by Hillel Murm. He walked through the dry, crowded streets of Vvardenfell, glad to be among so many strangers in the wharves of Vivek. He had no such anonymity. They knew him to be a smuggler, but here he could be anyone. A lower-class peddler, perhaps, a student even. Some people even pushed against him as he walked past as if to say, "We would not dream of being so rude as to acknowledge that you don't belong here." Cern Rayless was not in any of the taverns, but he knew she was somewhere, perhaps behind a tenement window or poking around in a dunghill for an exotic ingredient for some spell or another. He knew little of the ways of the sorceress, but that they always seemed to be doing something eccentric. Because of this prejudice, he nearly passed by the old dumber woman having a drink from a well. It was too prosaic, but he knew from the look of her that she was Cerne Rayless, the great sorceress. "I have gold for you," he said to her back, "if you will teach me the secret of breathing water." Again, breathing water. She turned around, a wide, wet grin stretched across her withered features. "I ain't breathing it, boy. I'm just having a drink." "Don't mock me," he said stiffly. "Either you're Cerne Rayless and you will teach me the spell of breathing water, or you aren't, and those are the only possibilities. If you're going to learn to breathe water, you're going to have to learn there are more possibilities than that, boy. The School of Alteration is all about possibilities, changing patterns, making things be what they could be. Maybe I ain't Cerne Rayless, but I can teach how to breathe water." She wiped her mouth dry. "Or maybe I am Cerne Rayless, and I won't. Or maybe even I can teach you to breathe water, but you can't learn." "I'll learn," he said simply. "Why don't you just buy yourself a spell of water breathing or a potion over the Mages Guild?" she asked. "That's how it is generally done." "They're not powerful enough," he said. "I need to be underwater for a long time. I'm willing to pay whatever you ask, but I don't want any questions. I was told you could teach me." "What's your name, boy?" "That's a question," he replied. "That's a question." So she's not supposed to answer me. His name was Tharian Winloff, but in Vivek, they called him the Toll Man. His job, such as it was collecting a percentage of the loot from the smugglers when they came into harbor to bring to his boss in the Kimono Tong. Of the value of that percentage, he earned another percentage. In the end, it was very small indeed. He had scarcely any gold of his own, and what he had, he gave to Cerne Rayless. The lesson began that very day. The sorceress brought her pupil, who she simply called Boy, out to a low sandbank along the sea. "I will teach you a powerful spell for breathing water," she said, "but you must become a master of it. As with all spells and all skills, you more you practice, the better you get." It's not written properly. "Even that ain't enough. To achieve true mastery, you must understand what it is you're doing. It ain't simply enough to perform a perfect thrust of a blade. You must also know what you are doing and why." "That's common sense," said Tharian. "Yes, it is," said Cerne, closing her eyes, "but the spells of alteration are all about uncommon sense. The infinite possibilities, breaking the sky, swallowing space, dancing with time, setting ice on fire, believing that the unreal may become real. You must learn the rules of the cosmos and then break them." "That sounds very difficult," replied Tharian, trying to keep a straight face. Cerne pointed to the small silver fish darting along the water's edge. "They don't find it so. They breathe water just fine." "But that's not magic." "What I'm saying to you, boy, is that it is." For several weeks, Cerne drilled her student, and the more he understood about what he was doing, and the more he practiced, the longer he could breathe underwater. When he found that he could cast a spell for as long as he needed, he thanked the sorceress and bade her farewell. "There is one last lesson I have to teach you," she said. "You must learn that desire is not enough. The world will end your spell, no matter how good you are, and no matter how much you want it." "That's a lesson I'm happy not to learn," he said, and left at once for the short journey back to Vivek. The wharves were much the same, with all the same smells, the same sounds, and the same characters. His boss had found a new tollman. He learned from his mates. They were still looking out for the smuggler ship Morodrung, but they had given up hope of ever seeing it. Tharian knew they would not. He had seen it sink from the wharf a long time ago. On a moonless night, he cast a spell and dove into the thrashing purple waves. He kept his mind on the world of possibilities, that books could sing, that green was blue, that water was air, that every stroke and kick brought him closer to a sunken ship filled with treasure. He felt magic surge all around him as he pushed his way deeper down. Ahead he saw a ghostly shadow of the Morodrung, its mass billowing in a wind of deep water currents. He also felt his spell began to fade. He could break reality long enough to breathe water all the way back up to the surface, but not enough to reach the ship. The next night he dove again, and this time the spell was stronger. He could see the vessel in detail, clouded over and dusted in sediment. The wound in his hull, where it had struck the reef, a glint of gold beckoning from within, but still he felt reality closing in, and he had to surface. The third night he made it into the steerage, past the bloated corpses of sailors, nibbled and picked apart by fish, their glassy eyes bulging, their mouths stretched open. Had they only known the spell, he thought briefly, but his mind was more occupied by the gold scattering along the floor. The boxes that contained them were shattered. He considered scooping as much as he could carry into his pockets, but a sturdy iron box seemed to bespeak more treasures. On the wall was a row of keys. He took each one down and tried it on the locked box, but none opened it. One key, however, was missing. Tharian looked around the room. Where could it be? His eyes went to the corpse of one of the sailors floating in a dance of death not far from the box, his hands tightly clutching something. It was a key. When the ship began to sink, this sailor was evidently gone from the iron box. Evidently gone for the iron box. Whatever was in it had to be very valuable. Tharian took the sailor's key and opened the box. It was filled with broken glass. He rummaged around till he felt something solid and pulled out 2 flasks of some kind of wine. He smiled as he considered the foolishness of the poor alcoholic. This was what was important to the sailor out of all the treasure in the Morrodrung. Then suddenly Tharian Winlaw felt reality. He had not been paying attention to the grim, tireless advance of the world on his spell. It was fading away. His ability to breathe water. There was no time to surface, there was no time to do anything as he sucked in, his lungs filled with cold, briny water. A few days later, the smugglers working on the wharf came upon the drowned body of the former tollman. Finding a body in the water in Vivek was not in itself noteworthy, but the subject that they discussed over many bottles of Flynn was how did it happen that he drowned with 2 potions of water breathing in his hands. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.